Thanks for joining me for episode 13 of the Field Quiver Outdoors podcast. I'm your host, Jody Thibodeau, and it's my goal with this and every episode to help you fill your quiver with God and the great outdoors. If you're not already subscribed to the show, make sure you go ahead and do that and turn notifications on. Also, if you're listening to us through a podcast streaming service and you're not aware that there's a YouTube channel, go ahead and check us out on YouTube as well. You can find, as of now anyway, it's just videos of the podcast interviews, but I'm working on some new content for that as well that's going to go beyond the podcast that will hopefully be dropping within the next few months. But if you're already following us, then thank you. I hope you're enjoying the show. If you have any suggestions or comments, be sure to either leave them below or shoot me an email at jody@fieldquiveroutdoors.com. Now, if you're interested in a way to support the show, then there are 4 easy ways that you can do that. The first and foremost is prayer. Pray for me, pray for the show. Another way that is completely free is if you're already following and subscribed to the show, leave a review and rate us. Apparently, that has something to do with the algorithms of the internet. So, however that works, I don't know. My understanding is ratings and reviews are where it's at. So, I'd be more than grateful for some good ratings and reviews. Another way that is completely free and only take a few seconds is to let some of your friends know about the show. Share the show with them. Send them a link to the show so that they can listen to it as well. Again, the more listens, this all factors into these algorithms. And the last, fourth, and final way that you can support the show is by buying some swag from fieldquiveroutdoors.com. Which, speaking of swag, that'll actually be the tied in with the first blip on my radar for On My Radar segment this week. We'll just go ahead and jump into that. But there's going to be some new merchandise dropping the week of the Boston Marathon to coincide with the interview that I plan to release on that weekend. Now, this interview hasn't happened yet, and that's actually the first blip on the radar. But before I go into it, let me go ahead and let you know that all of these interviews have been so interesting, and I don't want to cut anything out from them unless just absolutely necessary. And I want to try and keep them in one show as opposed to coming out multiple weeks, since we only release an episode every other week. The new format that I'm going to try out for On the Radar is going to be just me mentioning what it is. And if it's something that you think might be of interest to you, follow the link in the show notes and you can find out more about it yourself. That'll just save some time at the beginning of the episode so that we can just dive right into the interviews or the main content of the episode. But backtracking now, going to have an interview with Mark Long of FCA Endurance. And if you don't mind, follow the link at the bottom and go fill out a survey, especially if you participate in any type of endurance athletic events, running, cycling, triathlon, hiking even. Just go fill out that survey. It's going to help give us some talking points for when I do the interview with him coming up here in a few days. And those results will be posted on the website whenever the episode goes live. And they'll be updated. I'm going to leave the survey up indefinitely and just keep updating the results periodically. My next blip on the radar is it's got to do with, this is actually my church here in Lawrence, South Carolina. If you live in the area in upstate South Carolina and you're an angler and you're interested in testing out your casting abilities, we are doing a casting contest on April the 13th at 8 a.m. It is completely free, doing a free pancake breakfast before the competition. We're going to have awards for first, second, and third place in multiple age groups. And it's just going to be a good time, and it is completely free. So check out the link again in the show notes for more info on that and to register. It is limited to 75 registrants. So if you think you might want to do it, go ahead and sign up before it fills up. Next on the radar, a lot of this is South Carolina because that's where I'm at. But up next is South Carolina Bobwhites is hosting a Bobwhite Quail History, Biology, and Practical Management for South Carolina landowners class on March 28th. Again, there's a link to register if you're interested and to get more info on that. Lastly, for South Carolina is the Magnolia Fawn Rescue in Gray Court, South Carolina, is hosting an open house. Now, normally they don't do public tours of their facilities, but this one opportunity on March 23rd will allow you to go and check out their facilities and support them. They don't have a set entry fee. It's just whatever donation you want to give to access the event that day. Lastly, on the radar, we're going to jump out of South Carolina, go to Ohio. I noticed that they have an award. It's somewhat similar to our Black Bass Slam here in South Carolina, called the Fish Ohio program. And you can read more about that, but in a nutshell, if you catch certain species of certain sizes, you'll be awarded with the pin for Fish Ohio for this year. But again, follow the link there in the show notes if you want to learn more about that, if you're going to be in Ohio or if you live in Ohio. Now, let's move on into who my guest is this week. My guest this week is also a host of a podcast. He is the host of the Christian Outdoors podcast. His name is Pete Rogers. And while we spend the first part of the show talking about his podcast, the majority of the conversation focuses on his day job, which is he is a trapper for the USDA. Now, if you've ever been curious what exactly it is to be a trapper for the USDA, this is the show for you to listen to. He talks about why he does what he does and essentially the process and what they do with any of the animals that he harvests. But he also gives some pointers for anyone who might be interested in getting into trapping. Most intriguingly, I guess you could say, is his willingness to give his top secret bait recipe, which, as he told me in the interview, most trappers are probably more willing to tell you what their wife weighs and their wife's age than what their bait recipe is. So make sure you give it a listen. And you'll learn about trapping. You'll learn about his podcast, which if you're not listening to it, go and check it out. It's a great show. And we also go into turkey hunting because he's written a book on the subject, and he gives a few pointers for folks looking into beginning into that sport as well before moving into his faith adventure and how it has led him to his point now with Christian Outdoors. But without any further ado, enjoy the show. And if you're able to make it out on April 13th to the church for the casting contest, and I look forward to seeing you and meeting you there. Well, Pete, I appreciate you being on the show with me today. For the folks that aren't familiar with who Pete Rogers is, go ahead and give the audience a little bio and what your claim to fame is.
I have no fame, Jody. That's funny. Well, thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be on your show. I truly am. Again, Pete Rogers, you have to forgive my voice. I got allergies really bad, so I sound like I'm in a barrel, at least to myself I do. But Pete Rogers, I live in Greenville, South Carolina. I've been an outdoor writer for 25 years or so, a little over 1,400 stories published and a bunch of pictures with it. Also, I'm the host and founder of Christian Outdoors podcast, which is found on all the podcast platforms. And it's a podcast where we discuss all things outdoors and how to enjoy God every day, where we can talk about outdoor lifestyle and merge in our faith in the same show. And it seems to be doing pretty well. Yeah. So
Okay.
that's pretty much it.
All right. And as far as the podcast, we'll just go ahead and start talking about that. That's how I found you was listening to your podcast.
Okay.
And you are now in the 200s of your episodes, correct?
Yes. Yes. I've recorded pretty far in advance. I think this week we released 220, number 220.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've recorded about 20 more than that. Didn't start that way though, Jody. There was a lot of Saturday night specials there in the beginning. Now I'm telling you, it was pretty tough for those starting out in podcasting. I get a lot of requests for people asking about that, but that's another day. But yeah, we started in October of 2019. I do one show a week right now, and some of them are me interviewing people, and some of them are me with a couple of pastor friends of mine, and we talk about church related topics. And there's been a lot of those, and it's just a good place where I can talk about the things that I'm most passionate about, which is life outdoors and Jesus. And it seems to be resonating pretty well. We have about 2.5 million followers now. We have a YouTube channel also for those who like to watch podcasts, and it's at Christian Outdoors on YouTube. Everything is under that name. So if you're looking for us on any of the podcast apps, it's Christian Outdoors, and the website is christianoutdoors.org. And every episode is on the website as well.
Okay. Yeah. And I'll put a link in the show notes to that for anybody that wants to check you out, which I would recommend the show. I enjoy listening to you.
Thank you.
I'm pretty bad about missing a few episodes and then playing catch up and just binge listening there. But I guess let me ask you this. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that's a fascinating thing about podcasting for those who is that when people find you and they discover you, if they like it, they'll go back and start listening to old shows. So I'm still getting downloads here in my 5th season from season 1. And, episode 2 and 3 are still getting downloads. And so we're 14 and 20, and every episode gets downloads every month. As people find you, they start going back and listening to stuff. And so it's, that was surprising, right? When I look, I get 200,000 downloads a month, and those aren't the shows I ran that month. That's all the way back too, and it just keeps.
Right.
Then the numbers just keep growing.
Okay. Yeah. And so let me go ahead and ask you this before we jump off to the topic of podcasting and talk about something else. But what episode, if you have one, would you say is the most memorable episode for you?
Oh my goodness gracious, that's a tough one there, Jody. That is a tough one. So I've been blessed to have some really good guests on the show. Some of the biggest names in the outdoor industry have agreed to come on the show. I got some next week. I'm really excited to interview. Man, as far as some of the ones that were impactful to me would probably be the show I did with David Blanton last spring, and then the one last summer with Hank Parker. Those were really, really good. I got a lot out of those, listening to them tell their stories. I got an awful lot out of those, but man, after 200 and something shows, man, and you can't remember all of them, Jody, that's puts me on the spot pretty bad. So notice I said the ones I did last year. I'm sure there were some before that, years before that were very impactful, but it's hard for me to remember. Because if I usually record on Mondays, and I'll do 2 shows. I'll record 2 people on Mondays.
Okay.
And that show may not be released until April. Like the ones I'm recording Monday won't be released until April. So I've already recorded 10 other people before that show comes out. So when I listen to it, it's new to me again. And
Yeah.
and so, oh wow, that was that. And someone's like, oh wow, Pete, you didn't do good right there. The other ones are that turned out to be a pretty good show. I really enjoyed that one. So it's just hard. It's hard to know. Some of the ones that I've talked to, I've been really moved by their faith story and how they share that so openly and so freely. And so I've had a lot of people, Jody, say to me, I've never told this story before. And then they share it and has gotten a lot of impact on people. And other ones are people who have done things I've always wanted to do. I had a guy on the show, I can't remember his last name, his first name's Ryan, but he walked the entire Appalachian Trail just on a whim. He graduated college. What am I going to do next? He went and bought a backpack and a sleeping bag and took off. I'm like, that's a young man's trip right there. Another guy who did the Pacific Crest Trail, from Mexico to Canada. And those are really impressive stories to me personally, because I just admire people with that kind of stick to itiveness. But
now, as far as the podcast, it comes out on Mondays. It drops early in the morning on Mondays, right? For folks that aren't familiar.
That's correct. Every Monday at 5 a.m. Eastern time is when it drops. Yeah. And it's distributed to every podcast platform that I can find. Spotify, Radio, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, obviously, and Carbon TV, and again, my website. So,
okay. Yeah. And moving off of the podcast, which I will give you one more plug, the hat that you've got on. That's the logo that you've got for the show, which is pretty awesome design that you have. And folks can. Do you still have merchandise on the Christian Outdoors website with that design, correct?
That's right. I have this hat, and I have a green one, and I have orange ones, and I have t-shirts and hoodies and decals and stuff like that too. It's a pretty cool logo that my buddy came up with right when we started, and it's like the people use the term Jesus fish, but I call it the jacked up Jesus fish because he's got fins and eyes and stuff, and it just looks cool. I think it's a great logo. I didn't design it, so I can say I think it looks pretty cool. It does. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you click on the link that I'll have in the show notes, for you that are listening or watching, go ahead and check out what he's got for sale if you've got an interest. But moving off to a new topic, you have a day job that pays the bills. And that is what I really want to pick your brain on today. So if you would, for the folks that haven't listened to your shows, that haven't heard you say what it is that you do, what is it that you do?
Well, I work for the Department of Agriculture, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Wildlife Services, and I'm a trapper in Greenville, South Carolina. The main thing I do for them is beaver trapping. And a lot of people say, what in the world is the USDA doing beaver trapping? Well, my main customer is the Department of Transportation, Jody. And so the beavers, unbeknownst to a lot of people, they like to build dams. And they like to build dams in creeks and in streams that roads drive over, and they will flood the roads. They'll put the dams in the culverts or under the bridges and raise the water and cause a lot of damage to the roads. I was at a place yesterday where the beavers have been damming up, and the whole road is caving in from the water that's saturated into the roadbed, and now the road's caving in. They're going to have to put in bigger pipes and just do a lot of work, tens of thousands of dollars of work to repair what the beavers have done. So my job is I have the county of Greenville, which is 920 square miles, 1,750 miles of roads roughly, that I'm in charge of making sure that the beavers don't damage in any way. So I find them, I tear the dams down, I trap the beavers, and like I said, remove the dams mostly by hand, some of them with explosives, just depending on where they are and how good of a job they've done on building the dam. So that's the main thing I do with the USDA. Yeah.
Okay. And now with the trapping, how did you first get an interest in trapping?
Well, water trapping and land trapping are two different things. So I want to break it up for the listener. Okay. So I started trapping land trapping for raccoons, coyotes. Well, there wasn't coyotes back in the day. There was foxes, bobcats, and raccoons and possums. And, I'm an old man compared to you. I'm 60. And so back in the 70s in high school, there was a really good price for fur. I mean, like really good. As an example, a red fox would bring $250 in 1979 money. Okay. So that'd be $400 today. So for one fox. So there was a lot of money in fur back then. And so a buddy of mine in high school was telling me he was trapping. I was like, and he showed me kind of what he was doing. And I said, I love to hunt, I love to fish, but trapping is the most addictive thing I've ever done. I mean, it is unbelievable how addictive it has been for me, because it gives me time to spend outdoors. It gives me time to pursue animals differently than you do any other way, and you're doing a service to the environment. Now, a lot of people who are listening to this may not understand this, and if I can, I'd like to explain it. Is for populations to thrive of animals, pick your species. All right, for populations to thrive, they need to be managed to keep the population stable for the environment they're living in. As an example, if you have too many rabbits in a field, they're going to eat themselves to death. They're going to eat all the food away, and then they're going to starve to death. But if you can go out there and remove about 30 to 40% annually, then there's plenty of food for them. The ones that survive are going to be healthy. They're going to reproduce well, and they're in an environment that's not going to be overgrazed. It's the same thing for predators. So if there's an overabundance of coyotes on your property, then they're going to eat everything that they can. The main food for coyotes is not deer, by the way, it's mice, followed by rabbits and squirrels and whatever they can catch. A predator, they're opportunistic, whatever they can catch. There's more mice than anything else out there. So the main thing they eat is mice. But if the population gets too big, now they have to expand what they feed on, right? And then you start seeing a decline in population of other animals, whatever the coyote can catch, because they're the biggest predator in our area here in South Carolina. So there's not near as many foxes as there used to be. There's not near as many bobcats as there used to be, because the coyote is now eating so much food that there's no food for them. So now the foxes and the bobcats are getting dispersed into other areas where there's not as a large population. As an example, I'm trapping a little 400-acre piece here in Greenville County, and in 2 weeks I caught 8 coyotes on 400 acres. All right. And that is a lot for anybody who doesn't know, for 400 acres. That's like an awful lot. And we're still every day getting pictures of coyotes on the game cameras, even though I've already removed 8 off of it. And it's the same thing with raccoons and possums and skunks. And as a turkey hunter, I know that raccoons are nest predators. And what that means is that they will hunt for and find the nest of ground nesting birds. Quail, turkeys are the main ones that we kill deer. Any bird that nests on the ground, they can find their eggs, and when they do, they eat every one of them. I mean, they got a bundle of protein in their hand, Jody, right? So if they find a turkey nest with 13 eggs in it, 13 eggs are going to get eaten by that raccoon right then. And then that turkey doesn't have a chance to lay another brood. If she does, it's only going to be 1 or 2. And hopefully she can have those hatch and then raise them. I personally believe, and there's some science behind this, one of the main contributors to the decline of our turkey populations here in South Carolina is an overabundance of nest predators. And what I mean by that is, when turkey populations were at their peak in the late 80s and 90s, early 2000s, raccoon hunting was still very popular in South Carolina. I mean, even as far back as when I went to school, almost every boy had a dog box in the back of his truck, and he went coon hunting 4 or 5 nights a week, and they shot every coon that they treed. Well, today people don't do it. The few that do have learned, if I don't kill the coon, I can run them again tomorrow. So even the ones that do raccoon hunting aren't killing the raccoons. And so there is an enormous population of raccoons in our woods. I mean, an enormous amount. I believe if people knew how many there were, they wouldn't go out at night. Okay. Here's an example. I was trapping a creek, and I used dog-proof traps for raccoons. I can explain that later. And I put 20 traps in a 50-yard stretch. Okay, 50 yards on a creek. I caught 10 coons first night. Next night I caught 8. Next night I caught 8. The next night I caught 5. And then I ran it 5 nights, and I caught 10, 8, 8, 7, and 5. And 50 yards of one creek. Now that's just one example, but that is a lot of raccoons in that area. a lot. Okay. And there's just an overpopulation. So I love trapping. I think it's the hardest thing to do in outdoor recreation and outdoor professions. And it's very challenging and it's very rewarding as well because you're doing a service by removing these animals. And I've seen on my properties where I've been trapping raccoons hard for the last 6 or 7 years, the turkey populations continue to rise.
Okay. And now let me ask you this: as far as what you do trap, what do you typically do with that? Do you sell the hides, or what do you typically do with what you trap, either personally versus any kind of, if you're allowed to say, like USDA allowances? What would they allow you to do with whatever you trap?
Well, the policy for the USDA, as any government job, is we can't profit from our profession. Okay,
Okay.
so we dispose of the beavers in an environmentally friendly way. We're not allowed to skin them and sell the fur. We do harvest the castor glands out of them to make our own lures to catch other beavers with.
Okay.
But other than that, then we just dispose of them in an environmentally friendly way. That's what we do. With the predators, it just depends on which ones you catch. As an example, coyote fur in South Carolina is not worth anything. Nobody will buy it, and the reason is, if you ever seen a coyote from Montana fur, and then you see a fur from a South Carolina coyote, you're like, well, why am I going to buy this one? The fur from the Montana is 4 to 5 inches thick. Ours is a half-inch thick, right? So there's just no
Okay.
market for it. The service that you're doing is just removing the predators off the land, and
Okay.
and I'll come back to that. Foxes, bobcats, and raccoons. There is a market for those, and I sell the ones that I can. Um, Probably, and fur markets are like corn prices. They're up and down constantly. And fur is pretty frowned upon in America. So the overseas markets is pretty much where it all goes to China, Russia, Romania, those type places where fur is still sought for because it gets really, really cold there, and they
Right.
understand the insulation factor of fur. So the market is just it's hard to sell. Here's an example. I told you what a red fox was paying in 1979, about $250. Today, that same red fox is going to bring $13.
Okay.
Right. So it's a volume based thing at that point. And different states have different laws. I don't know which state you're listening to this in, but in South Carolina, during trapping season, there's no limit on the number of animals we can catch. So if I can catch 1,000 foxes, I can catch 1,000 foxes, and that's legal, and I can sell 1,000 foxes. In Greenville, there's not 1,000 foxes to catch, but down in the Low Country, down in Orangeburg and Williamsburg, Dorchester, Berkeley, that big farmland, red foxes thrive. And I got buddies, they don't catch 1,000, but they'll catch several hundred, and every year on the same property, which says we're not even hurting the population, we're just keeping it in balance. See,
Okay.
yeah, and so there's a meat market for some of the animals, for the people who make bait for trapping. So you can sell the carcass to bait makers, and then there's a fur market. And in South Carolina, we also have a live market for coyotes. So down in the low country, they have running pens where they train dogs to chase fox and coyotes, and they're enclosures, large, the
Mhm.
300-400 acres, high fence, protected. And the guys that own those will buy the coyotes alive and put them in the pens so that other people who enjoy this kind of thing can go have their dogs chase them.
Okay.
I don't
And
understand it, but they get it, but they do it.
yeah. And just for a follow up with the USDA aspect, you can't understand that you can't sell in any way, shape, form, or fashion, whatever you harvest for personal profit. Now, say if you wanted to keep the hide for personal use, would that be allowed?
I
No.
would be personally profiting from it then. Not
Okay, I got you.
financially, but personally, it's
I got you.
we're not allowed to do that at all.
Okay.
I mean, and I catch a lot of beavers,
Yeah.
and is it a waste? No. And some people ask, well, why do you have to kill them? Well, the law says you cannot relocate beavers. That's nationwide. Okay.
Mhm.
Because all you're doing is moving the problem. If I catch a beaver on Jody's property alive and I move it over to Pete's property, now I've just moved the problem from Jody's property to Pete's property. Right. And I've been
Right.
tracking Greenville with the USDA for 13 and a half years. And every year I catch over 100 beavers just in Greenville County. And I'm not a fur trapper. I'm just doing the ones that are threatening the roads. If I wanted to chase the beavers further, further away from the roads into some of the swamps and stuff, I could triple that number easily every year, easily.
I got you.
Yeah.
And well, we'll go off of the trapping. It's still related, but since we're talking about beavers specifically, you have a personal YouTube channel also, Pete Rogers Outdoors. And you have a lot of videos there. And there's actually one I watched on there not too terribly long ago about skinning out a beaver tail to make fish bait.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's one thing you didn't say in there that I was curious about. And I know you store it in a jar, but once you put it in the jar, if you're not going to use it immediately, how do you then in turn store your bait? Just in the fridge, or do you freeze it?
I freeze it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I do. I put it in those little jars that you saw me put it in those little, what is that, a 4-ounce jar maybe.
Yeah.
And I just put them in the freezer. I take a Sharpie and write on the jar what it is, whether it's strip, chunk, or whatever. Catfish, the catfish bait I cut bigger, and panfish bait I cut smaller. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And I got that idea from some of my buddies who do what we do up in the Dakotas and do a lot of ice fishing. They said that is the number one bait people use for ice fishing.
Really?
I was like, how many thousands have I thrown away, not even knowing that was you could fish with it. Yeah, and it stays on the hook really well. So it's a good bait. You can catch, I'd say on an average time 4 or 5 brim per piece of bait.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Yeah. And so for the folks curious about what exactly we're talking about, I'll put a link to that specific video also in the show notes. But it's Pete going through a step-by-step how to flesh out a beaver tail and then convert the contents of the tail into fish bait. Right. So, and even if you don't have any interest in actually skinning out a beaver tail yourself, it is pretty interesting to watch to learn about that.
Yeah.
And, but moving on to a different aspect of trapping. If somebody new to trapping, we're looking to get into it initially. Obviously, they are because they're new to it. What would be the first things or areas that you would suggest they look into as far as research? Are there any particular books you would say they watch or videos they read?
You can learn everything on YouTube nowadays. Back when I did it, it was books and hands-on. And then start with the easy animals to catch and move up to the harder ones, because success builds confidence. Confidence makes you better, blah, blah, blah. And raccoons are the easiest. Raccoons and possums are the easiest to catch because they're very, very curious, and there's a lot of them. Okay. And we can get into that, but I would say YouTube, there's some really good YouTube channels out there that are very good at instructing. I need to do more videos like that as well, just because I like to teach and I really like to trap. So I just haven't taken the time to do it, but there's some really good ones in there. And I would say just on YouTube, just search for raccoon trapping as an example. And all right, so I'm going to break this down, Jody, if I may. If you're new to it and you want to get started, I strongly encourage starting with raccoons. And here's a couple of reasons. One is there's a lot of them. They're easy to catch. Compared to other animals. Number two is if you use dog-proof traps, which I'll explain in a minute what that is, then it gets you access to people's property, because you can show them, I'm not going to catch your dog or your cat. I'm only going to catch either a raccoon, a skunk, or a possum. And what a dog-proof is, the name says what it is, dog-proof. It is a cylinder. Most of them are round, some are square, but it's about 4.5 inches long. And the bait goes inside of it. And the raccoon, since he has opposable thumbs, he'll reach his hand in there to grab the bait. And when he does, it grabs him around the forearm. And his hand is inside the cylinder. It's a steel cylinder. So he's not going to chew his fingers. He's not going to do any of that to try to get out because it catches him around the forearm and he can't get to his hand, which is now holding him. And then it's anchored to a ground of a tree. I anchor them to trees with a long cable so that they can't run off with it. And it's super easy. All right. And I buy a brand called Z Traps. They're not sponsoring me, so I can say them. Z, the letter Z Trap. And I prefer the white ones. And the white ones for two reasons. They come in white, steel colored, or brown. I can't find my brown ones. I just can't see them. Okay, I have lost so many traps trying to hide them from people that I can't even. I hit them from myself. So I get the white powder coated ones for two reasons: so that I can see it, number one, and two, the raccoon can see it, and they're very curious, right? So if it's white and it's attractive, then they'll go over there and look, and then the scent hits them, and then they start eating. And the bait is very simple. Now I got to preface this, Jody. Trappers are very particular about sharing their bait. Most of us would rather tell you how much our wife weighs than tell you what we use for bait.
That is pretty intense.
That's pretty intense. But because it's you, I'm going to share.
All right. I appreciate that.
I get the small marshmallows. You know, the small ones like the ones go in hot chocolate. Put 3 of those under the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Dry cat food on top of that. You don't have to fill it up about half full. And the reason I want a half full is I don't want to fatten him up before I catch him. I want him to catch him the first time he puts his hand in the trap. Usually you don't. If I put the camera on it, he's in there pulling stuff out, eating it. And then all of a sudden, boom, he's got him. Right? I get the dry cat food from Dollar General and marshmallows from Dollar General. It's very cheap, pretty weather resistant. And I will literally put 3 marshmallows in and get them below the trigger. And that gives it the trigger's cushion. Okay. If you fill it up with cat food, then now the trigger's stuck. It can't go down or up because the food's underneath it. Right.
Okay.
I put the marshmallows in there for the reason is there's that vanilla scent that marshmallows have that a raccoon can smell, and it gives the trigger cushion. Then I put dry cat food on top, and I'll spill some cat food around it. Okay. And then and then the next thing is to put it where raccoons travel, which comes with experience. But the easy thing to do is look for creeks, and you'll see their little handprints in the mud, and you put it right where their print is. Literally.
Okay.
You want them to bump their nose into it or be really close. Right. You got to make sure you're not getting rain, the water rises and it floods your trap. So I set them off. I don't put them like on the sandbar. I put them right beside it. But or where my cable will reach so I can tie it off. And the old saying in trapping is if there's enough sign that you want to put 1 trap, then put 2. If there's enough sign, meaning tracks and scat or whatever, for 2 traps, then put 4. And it's because you can't catch 2 if you only got 1 trap out.
Okay.
And you can't catch 3 if you only have 2 traps out. Right. So if I'm trapping a creek, I'm going to find, as I said earlier, the best 50-yard stretch I can find on that creek that I have access to. And I'm going to put 20 traps in that 50 yards, at least. Both sides of the creek, different heights on the bank, some on the edge of the water, some up on the bank pretty high. Because you'll see pretty quick if you're looking for it, you'll see how the coons are coming down the bank. They like to use the same trails, and you just put it where they walk right into it. And the next morning, you go in there and you got raccoons.
Okay.
That's the easiest way to get started.
Okay. And as far as equipment for somebody looking to get into it with, we'll just say raccoons. They just need some cable to tie off the trap with, the trap, and your cat food and marshmallows. And that's pretty much it, other than obvious licenses and things of that nature.
Right. Well, the traps come with about a 8-inch chain with 2 swivels on it. You can use, like some people still use rebar, and they'll take a piece of rebar and drive it through the swivel of the chain. It'll hold a 1/2-inch rebar, will go through it and anchor it that way. And I've seen people take big fence staples and nail the chain to a tree, and the raccoon can't pull it out. I mean, they're strong, but they're not that strong. Right. And you can also put them on drags. I know a lot of people who do that as well, which is basically a long chain with a an anchor or something to get tangled up. So when they run off, then the chain will get hung up in something, right? That's a little more advanced for a lot of the new people. I like to get just what is that? 1/16 inch cable from Lowe's, right? And I make a big loop. What's that? 4-inch loop, so that and I wrap it around the tree, and then thread the trap through it, just like a slip knot. Stick it in the ground. Put my bait in it. It's ready to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
And since we've talked about the easiest animals to trap, and you don't have to go into detail, but what, as far as you're concerned, what is probably the most difficult animal that you anyway have ever trapped or ever attempted to trap?
Well, I find bobcats the hardest. No, I got a buddy who catches a lot more cats than he does coyotes, and it could be my property that I'm trapping, right? There may not be as many, because the techniques for bobcats and for coyotes are very similar. Now, I want to go back to the raccoon trap. They're about $10-12 a piece. So that's what somebody's want to know how much they cost. All right.
Okay.
On the foothold traps that we use in our state, it can only be 5¼ inches wide when it's opened. That's the biggest we're allowed to use. So I buy all my traps, again, not sponsoring them, from a company called Minnesota Trap Line. And they make a trap, MB from Minnesota brand, that's called a 550. It's 5¼ inches wide. It's perfect. Cast jaws really is by far, to me, the best trap ever made. And it's about $15-16 a piece, but they last for decades. Okay. That's the thing to understand, is if you're going to get into trapping, I did what a lot of people do. I started off buying stuff on eBay or from somebody else. I bought cheap stuff to see if I liked it, and I ended up working on them constantly because they were cheap traps. Okay. And then I saved my money and I bought just 1 dozen of the MB 550s, and I've never done. They come in the box ready to put it in the ground. Okay, I mean, they are really, really good traps. And there's some competitors to it. Bridgers are pretty good, and the Duke traps are pretty good too. I mean, I have a little bit of all of them because I've tried them all. But anyway, it's really hard to describe in the amount of time we have the nuances of land trapping for predators. And again, I would say go to YouTube and just Google how to trap bobcats and how to trap coyotes, because it's just here's how I describe it, Jody, is if I'm coyote hunting, okay, and I got a caller out there and I got my little squealer going, that coyote, if he gets within 150 yards, he's dead, right? I got a high-powered rifle. I can shoot him, boom, he's dead. As soon as I see him, I get the gun on him, he's dead. When I'm trapping, I'm trying to make him put his foot in a 5-inch circle. Okay. That means you have to bring the top predator of our area not only in to investigate your trap, but you have to convince him where to put his foot. Okay. And he has to put it in exactly the right spot. So if you have a circle and he sits on the edge of the circle, you hadn't caught him. He has to step in the middle of the circle. So that's on the pan that causes the trap to fire. To me, I love that challenge. Love that challenge of trying to get them to do exactly that so that you can catch them. And you miss a lot. And just a little tweak here, a little tweak there, and then you can catch them. But I love that challenge of being able to try to convince the top predators to put their foot exactly where you want them to. And I caught a bobcat last week, so that was pretty cool. On that same property I was telling you where I caught the 8 coyotes, I caught a bobcat there as well. Okay. And to me, that's the addiction of it, is that challenge of finding them, identifying their travel routes, and then putting the trap in the right place so that they're going to investigate, and then setting it in such a manner that they're going to put their foot right where you want them to.
Okay. And now naturally we're sitting here talking, I'm asking you about how to get into trapping, how people can get into trapping. Now, naturally, if you are listening to this and you are interested in getting into trapping and starting, then YouTube, but probably more importantly, to cover yourself, is whatever state you live in, make sure you know the trapping laws where you are. Whatever permits you have to have, make sure you've got them, know what the rules and regulations are. I know South Carolina it just changed. Was it this year or last year where you don't have to have an actual trapping permit to have, what is it, 1 or 2 furs for personal use?
It's 5. It's up to 5.
It's up to 5. Okay.
Yeah, up to
And
5.
because it used to be, you used to have I might be thinking wrong, but you used to have a trapping license to have any, right?
It's been a long time since that changed, but there's
Okay.
always been one on 5, but you still have to have
Okay.
your trap. Your traps still have to be tagged with
Right.
some type of identifying marker on it that says that it's yours. I use copper tags with my SCDNR ID number on it,
Okay.
and in South Carolina, I'm going to talk about our laws. We can check our traps from 1 hour before daylight to 1 hour after sunset, right? And we have to check them every 24 hours. If it's a foot trap, the only ones that are longer are kill traps, water traps, which are the body grips or the drowners, and that's a 48-hour check on those. The
Okay.
ones that kill animals instantly. But on any foot trap for land trapping, it's a 24-hour check, and we can check from 1 hour before daylight to 1 hour after. Other states have different times and different rules about that. So, whatever state that you're in when you listen to this, definitely read your rules and regulations, because trap size, trapping methods, and techniques are different for every state. As an example, we can't use snares on land, but we can in the water. And in many states, you can use snares on land, but they have to meet this specific design and criteria. So really know, because golly, Jody, I'll tell you, if we could snare on land, I could catch 20 times the number of coyotes that I catch. At
Okay.
least, 20 times the number of coyotes. But we
Right.
can't, so I don't, right? And so
Yeah.
we have to do it the way that's legal. Also, trap size varies by each state. Right, we're at the 5.5, whereas other states are 7, 8. Water traps, we can use a 7.5-inch trap because the beaver has a really big foot. Right,
Mhm.
so if we had a 5-inch trap in the water, you're not going to catch him because
Right.
he's his foot over the entire trap.
Yeah.
So we
So,
can use 1/2-inch traps in the water.
okay. And just kind of going along with that, as far as um, I just lost it. Lost the question. Um, oh, as far as the timing with the 24-hour window, and I know you've mentioned having them on camera a couple times. That's an actual, in South Carolina anyway, you have to physically go and check the trap. You can't just set up a cellular trail cam and use that as your check. But I would imagine that's my understanding of the law. Correct me if I'm wrong, but do you ever put cameras on your traps just to kind of help you monitor?
I don't use it to monitor. I use it to learn.
Okay.
I'm fascinated at the way that these animals are approaching my traps. I have it on video mode. How they are approaching my traps. Are they coming in super cautious? Are they coming in, just running right in there and getting caught, or which they never do? And how are they approaching it? How are they working the set? In other words, I usually typically do what's called a dirt hole set. So I will dig a 3 or 4 inch hole about 2 feet deep in the ground that looks like an animal dug a hole in there, a mouse hole, if you will. And I'll throw bait down in there and put my trap about 8 or 9 inches in front of that. And that distance is determined by how long a coyote's neck is. So if he has his nose in the hole, where's his front feet going to be? That's where that distance comes from. If you're trying to catch fox, it's closer to the hole. Coyotes, it's further back. Some guys go as far as 13 inches. I don't know how they got the number 13, but they go 12, 13 inches back. I use the distance from my fist to my elbow as my measuring. I just put the trap right there. That's what I do. And so I'll throw bait down in the hole. There's bait and lure. Bait is food based. Lure is not. And then I set my trap. And again, a lot of details in there that we don't have time to go through. And so back to your thing about the game camera, I set it up to see how the animal's working the set. How are they approaching it? And if I'm missing them, why am I missing them?
Okay.
I can give you an example. I caught a coyote in this pouring down rain we had over the weekend. For 3 days in a row, he was digging up my trap. just flipping it out of the ground. I was like, just what am I doing wrong? And I even changed the trap out, put a different trap because I'd already caught a coyote at that same spot. So I changed the trap out, put a different trap in the ground. Next morning, flipped it up out of the ground. I said, okay, all right, this is what I'm gonna do. Again, a hole right on the edge of a field. So I reset that trap, and then I went on the opposite side of the hole and put another trap, but made it look like it that I had never been there. Next morning, I had him on the backside hole.
Okay.
He had been flipping it up. And he's like, I know something's here and been stealing my bait. So I put that back like it was, but he was coming in from the back. I could tell by his tracks. So I caught him on the backside. I ended up catching him in both traps because when he was pulling on one, he stepped in the other one. But it's just easy to tell which one was first by the way that their position and so forth. But yeah, so that challenge of how's he doing this? Why am I not catching this? That's why I put the cameras up, is really just to monitor that. And also, look and say, oh yeah, I did get one. I need to go ahead and go check them or take care of other stuff and go first. But I like to go get them out as quickly as I can.
Okay. And going to a completely other topic from the podcast and trapping. And you mentioned earlier that you were a turkey hunter. So I have a few turkey hunting questions for you now.
Okay.
So as far as with your turkey hunting goes, for somebody new getting into turkey hunting, what would be the call, either the type of call, whether it's a box, slate, diaphragm, would you say from personal experience is probably the easiest for somebody to pick up, and what would be the first call that they should learn?
Okay. Good question. I think the box call is the easiest to learn. And just start with the cluck. Just if you'd have told me this, I'd have brought some calls up here. I had them ready, but I'd start with a box call.
Okay.
I bought the first call I ever bought was in 1978 as a ML Lynch world champion double-sided box call. I still use that call every year.
Okay.
Right. So that was from 78 and now I don't care, 40 to 44 years. I've been using that call and kill turkeys with it every year. Just simple clucks and then yelps. That's it. If you can cluck, just I have killed so many turkeys doing just that. That's all. You don't have to do it often. You don't have to do it loud. So I think a box call is the easiest. Next would be a slate or what's called a pot call. And the reason it's a pot call because the surface may not be slate. It may be glass, maybe ceramic, maybe copper, maybe aluminum, but a regular slate call or a glass call, which means that the surface is glass, also are fairly easy to learn. And again, clucks and yelps. That's where you need to start. Basic calls. And if you've ever been in deer hunting and seen a flock of turkeys and listened to them, they're not very loud, are they?
Nope.
They're not.
They're not.
It's one elderly gentleman who has passed away now, Mr. Hudson. He's in my turkey book called The Turkey Whisperer. He's the softest caller I've ever heard. And I asked him, I said, Mr. Hudson, why in the world do you call so soft? He looked at me and said, you like it when your wife yells at you, or would you rather her whisper in your ear? I was like, that's a good question. That's a good question. I'd much rather her whisper in my ear than scream at me. And he says, sometimes screaming gets your attention, but if you want to get him to come to you, you're going to have to whisper to him. And ever since then, I have toned down my calling. And I mean, sometimes you got to get loud and reach out there and touch them, find out where they are. But once you know that time is coming, you can just whisper or just get quiet.
Okay.
Clucks and yelps are the primary things. That the third one would be a purr.
Okay.
Just something like that. That's all you got to do. Yep. Because when you hear that flock, when you're deer hunting, that flock's coming by, what are they doing? They're clucking very soft and purring to each other. So it's a relaxing call. It puts the birds at ease. If you can purr very softly, it puts them at ease that There's nothing to be alarmed about. There's just some birds over here feeding. And when you're trying to call that gobbler in, you want him as relaxed as possible before you
Okay.
take TVA Scout 410 and nail him in the noggin with it.
Right. And now your land that you hunt on, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but is in the lower part of the state, lower part of South Carolina, right?
In the Midlands, Kershaw County.
Okay, in the Midlands. So now, as far as locator call, what is your favorite type of locator call? Are you a crow, owl?
Me like at daylight?
Yeah.
I don't use them.
You don't? Okay.
I don't for two reasons. Is I don't want him to know where I am.
Okay.
All right. And so I just let the woods wake up on their own and listen for him to gobble on the tree. Then I beeline towards him. And I'm one of these guys that pushes the limit. Now, Jody, I will try to, depending on how dark it is, but I'll get as close as I can. I mean, I try to get inside 100 yards if I can.
Okay.
If it's getting light, I'll stop a little further back if I know he's still in the tree. But I try to get as close as I can. I know some hunters will stay 300-400 yards away. I said, that's just too much can go wrong in that distance, man. So I want to get as close as I can and set up and get ready to start talking to him. Right.
Okay.
Because it really doesn't happen until he hits the ground anyway.
Yeah.
But if he's in the tree and I'm close enough, then just a few little soft clucks and purrs, he may fly down in my direction. And then he just cut the distance in half.
Okay. And now let me ask you this. This is something that probably be more fitting for the Me Too segment that we'll get to here shortly. But have you ever bagged a turkey with a bow? Or have you ever had any interest in trying to do it?
I wanted to do it without a blind. You know, these pop-up blinds, it's pretty easy to do out of a blind. It's really not much of a challenge as far as which weapon you're using in a blind because you're shooting at 15 feet. Yeah. So I have failed miserably, at this. And I was like, I don't want to do it out of a blind again. It's like, that's just, that doesn't do it for me. I don't like to hunt out blinds, out of the hub style blinds, you know, that's in the field and your decoys and your birds just come. While it's very effective, to me, it takes some of the challenge out of it. So I've had opportunities. I've missed several. So to answer your question, no, I have not.
Okay. Well, maybe this year. Season's right around the corner. So.
I want to tell you though, the 410 has just changed me. You know, it really has, Jody. When this TSS shot came out and I saw that these sub gauges were now lethal on turkeys, because when I came along, we carried the biggest gun we could carry.
Right.
You know, 10 gauges. And when the 3.5 came out, we're all shooting 3.5-inch shells, and it's brutal. I hate them. I'll never shoot another one ever. You couldn't pay me to shoot a 3.5-inch shell. And I know some of these guys say the only reason I don't shoot 4-inch is because they don't make them. I'm like, well, I'd like to call the turkey closer. And, you know, I mean, CVA is a sponsor of my show, so I can say their name, but it weighs barely 5 pounds. It's a single shot. It patterns out to 45 yards very well. I killed a turkey last year at 36 yards, one shot in the noggin with a 410. So I'm like, why maim myself when I don't have to? Because I mean, the furthest I killed one with a 12 gauge was 50 yards. So I'm sorry. Why do that if I don't have to, right? Why do I want to hurt myself if I don't have to? So I'm a big proponent of sub gauges, 20 gauges, even for grown men. 20 gauge is a really good turkey gun. And so is, again, a 410 or even a 28, because now this TSS shot is now being made in 28 gauges. So, and that's my favorite upland shotgun is a 28 gauge. But yeah, I love the 410 personally. So I will say this though, to anybody, don't just grab a shotgun and go out there and plan to kill a turkey, right? You need to know how your gun shoots. Every shotgun is going to shoot a little bit right, a little bit left, a little bit high, or a little bit low, right? And if you don't know that, then you're going to miss turkeys because you're shooting for their head, right? That's a pretty small target. It's a pretty small target. And I put red dots on my shotguns too. I like the red dot, man, maybe because I'm an older guy, but I won't, when that dot hits that turkey's head, I know that's where, but I've zeroed it. I've
Right.
taken it to range. I've shot patterns. I've shot, the turkey targets, and I know now I'm zeroed in. Most of my pellets are here, all the way out to 45 yards with that 410. So anything inside 5 is dead.
Okay.
DED.
And going on the table.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, let's go ahead and move out of the world of the outdoors and hunting, and let us hear about your faith adventure, how you came to know and start in your relationship with Jesus, and how that looked for you.
Okay. Well, thank you for asking that, 'cause that's an important part of my story. I didn't grow up in church. My parents were not active in church. I mean, we moved around a lot, Jody, growing up. So when we'd move to a new town, we'd go to church for a few weeks, and or maybe a month or two, 4 or 5 Sundays, and then Dad would go out the golf course, and we just didn't go. And my sister, who is 9 years older than me, she started going to a church when I was about 12 years old, and started taking me with her. And it was there, a small church in Wallace, South Carolina, called Wallace Baptist Church. And I tell you, it's small. I'm talking about the building and the number of people. There were, I think, 12 pews total, counting the choir loft. Okay.
Mm.
And 20 people. But it was on a Wednesday night service there that I felt that I understood that Christ had died for me. And I remember going down the aisle, Preacher Frank Stivic, and going down there and not even knowing why I went. I just felt like I can feel myself just going down the aisle and telling the pastor that I wanted to be saved. And that's when it happened. So April 12th of 1976, it was an event for me, right? But here's the good part of the story is that was in April, and in June we moved again, but my sister had gotten married and stayed behind. So now we moved again, and we moved to Saluda, South Carolina, and no way to go to church. Parents didn't go. Went a few times to different places, but that was it. And we're living 12 miles out in the country. I didn't have a way to go. So there was a lapse, and then we ended up moving to town. And I met some friends who were going to a church. So I started going with them. And it was there that I felt, was when I first felt a call to go into the ministry. And just, I don't know, Jody, it's just kind of odd because ever since that day that I accepted Christ, I've had this complete assurance that God was with me all the way. I was ignorant in the faith. I had no knowledge, no mentors, no one to show me the way, but I had a desire to want to know. And then going to church and to Sunday school and youth group, there were little seeds that were planted that just caused curiosity. And then I started dating a girl who went to a Methodist church and to MYF there, back when we called it MYF, Methodist Youth Fellowship. Now they have all these weird names for them now. But anyway, um, that Sheila Sheely in Saluda, um, that woman had a profound impact on me in my faith. She had some of the strongest faith of anybody I've ever known, and she's still alive. And I've told her this. She has some of the strongest faith that I've ever known, and the way that she taught us and ministered to us really made an impact on me. And that's when I decided that I said, well, I want to do more with this. Um, but if I have time, I'd like to tell one more part of that.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. As a young man and as a teenager, and still have a very severe speech impediment. Obviously, I do better now, but I couldn't speak out loud at all, Jody. I couldn't read out loud at all. I mean, very severe stutter, and it was very debilitating. It was humiliating. People make fun of you, and they always rib you and everything. But I was pretty good athletically. it was so bad because I was the quarterback of the high school team, and I couldn't call the plays in the huddle. I couldn't get it out. So the coach would send in players every play, and they'd call the play for us in the huddle, and then we'd go run the play. And then I hear God saying, Pete, I want you to proclaim my word. I'm like, that is not funny. Me and God had some serious talks, Jody. I'm being serious now. We had some serious talks. And I've heard all this stuff. Well, Moses had a speech. I'm not Moses. So I don't care what Moses went through. This is what Pete's going through. Right. And I've gone to a lot of speech therapists and a lot of techniques that I've learned and still do and still practice those today. And gradually over time, as my confidence built, and I was not miraculously healed. I still stutter. I still stammer, but I have learned through 40 years of doing this. As one of the therapists identified, she happened to be my Aunt Betty. She identified certain combinations of words that I can't say and certain letter combinations that I just can't say. So she's like, avoid them, substitute words. Instead of saying that, say this. I was like, is that simple? She said, yes, it really is that simple. And if you feel like you're fixing to get stuck, stop, start over. But she taught me how to do that in a way that you don't recognize unless I tell you that I'm doing it. I do it every time I talk. Whenever I get in front of the microphone, I stand in front of a group of, 20 to 2,000 people. I'm doing it all the time. You just don't recognize it because I've learned how to mask it. All right. And so I can give some examples, but so it's a very important part of my story to see how God has took someone who was not scared to speak in public, but was unable to speak in public, and has turned them into somebody who makes a good part of his living talking on podcasting and speaking events. And every time I get in front of the microphone, Jody, or I get up on a stage to talk to a group of people, I am in awe of what God has done. And every time I do this, I know that it is because of what God has done in me that has enabled me to continue to share his message, because I was not able to speak at all.
Okay. Yeah, and just for the folks that are listening, it's amazing what God can do. And just your one example of you. Other folks have instances, they might not be to that extent, but God will work in everybody. And before we move into the last segment, there's something I like to ask all the guests, and that is, how can I and the folks that are listening or watching pray for Pete? How can we pray for you specifically?
Oh, wow. Well, the podcast is growing really big, and it's continuing to grow. And what I ask people to do is to continue to pray that God use that to reach people, and that it will not be about Pete. Even though I'm the host, I don't want to get in his way, right? I want God to use me, to use this platform that he's given us to reach as many people as possible. So I think that the prayer that I would ask is that God continue to bless Christian Outdoors Podcast and me to be in such a way that I'm obedient to him, and that he is the one that is glorified through this, not me. I mean, there's a certain amount of fame that comes with growing the way we've grown, but I need to make sure that people understand it's bad grammar coming. It ain't Pete doing it. It's what God is doing through this.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I've had a couple of guys kind of look at me funny when I tell them, yeah, I'm interviewing a guy that does another podcast that's saying, then when I explain what your podcast is, like, that's very similar to yours. I said, yeah, but at the end of the day, we both have the same ultimate goal, that it's not about us. It's not about the topics. It's not about the guest. We're just using that as our platform to get the message out about God and about Christ.
Right.
And, but I will definitely get you on my list in that regard. And now that we've got the serious bit out of the way, let's go ahead and have some fun, if you don't mind, and
Sure.
go ahead and go with the Me Too round and let the audience find out just how much they have in common with Pete Rogers. So I've got the same or 7 questions that I ask everybody. Now, 1 or 2 change depending on what the guest background is. But I've had you already go ahead and give me the 3 numbers for the mystery questions at the end that are just at random because you picked them at random. But the first question up is, what is your favorite Bible story?
Story, I like Jonah. I
Okay.
like the story of Jonah. Yeah, I do. And it's because he really fought against God, but then God poured his grace out on him. And God said, all right, just do what I ask. That's all I'm asking you to do, man. Just do what I ask and I will bless you. And he did.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this next question is a bit of a 2-parter, but it is in regards to like an outdoors related venue, be it a state park, national park, museum, the Ark as in Kentucky. What venue or location has been your favorite that you've ever been able to visit?
Is it a Christian location or just any location?
Just any in general. I mean, it can be a state park, national park, a specific mountain that you've climbed or trail that you've hiked.
Pretty much anything in Wyoming.
Okay.
I would move there tomorrow if my wife would go.
I got you.
And the Tetons are just some of the most beautiful things God ever made. They
Okay.
really are. Yeah.
All
Western.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the second part of that is, where's somewhere that you have not been that you would like to experience and see?
I want to go to the Arches and Zion Parks in Utah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's high on my list. Yeah.
Okay. What is a food whenever you're be it going hunting or just any other sort of an outdoor trip or adventure? What is a food that you consider as a staple in your cooler?
In my cooler, but not my backpack, huh? When I'm
Well,
going
it
to
can
my
be in your backpack. Yeah.
okay, because that's going to be a little
What?
Debbie nutty bar that goes in my backpack. Now I got to
Okay.
have my little Debbie nutty bar.
I got you.
Other than that, you know, golly, I can my venison, and that is my favorite way to eat venison. So that is in my hunting camp. I will have that every time I go. Some canned
Okay.
venison. Yeah,
Okay.
on top of rice. Yeah.
All right. What is an item and if you have one, that is highest on your outdoor bucket list? If you don't have a bucket list, what would be the most pursued thing that you want to do in the outdoor space?
It's funny you asked that because I wrote a story one day is what's my favorite hunt, and I answered it in my next one. But my dream hunt would be a South African safari. That's a hunt. I've dreamed about that my entire life, being able to go to South Africa and hunt down there, all those cool critters that roam down there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And this next one's a little bit off on a side trail, but what is your favorite cryptid or the one that you're the most intrigued by?
Sasquatch.
Okay. Was
How far
Sasquatch real?
is
Does he
Sasquatch
exist?
real? This is how I answer that question since you asked me bluntly. I think it's strongly possible. I don't think it's probable.
Okay. I got you. Yeah, I just like putting folks on the spot with that question.
Yeah,
And
that's the only trip that I'm aware of anyway, but there's probably other. But yeah, I think the Squatch I think it's a cool story. I think it's a cool thing.
yeah.
And I think it's very possible. We discover species all the time, new species that's never been known to man. But I still think it's probable.
Okay.
It'd be cool to see one at a distance. Just clarify at a distance.
Yeah. What is an outdoor slang term that either you've had to explain to someone's had to explain to you, or you just think it's a fun term to throw out there?
Yeah, give me an example of what you're talking about because I'm not coming up with anything.
Well, I know an Eisenhower. You know what an Eisenhower is?
Yes,
Yeah,
perch.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like just something that somebody might not know. I know Chris Wells. His was take me to the hill. Take me to the hill.
I got nothing, man. I'm drawing a blank.
All right.
I am
Well,
drawing a blank.
what's a trapping term that you think you would most likely have to explain to somebody?
Pretty much all of them.
All of them. Well, okay.
One that we use a lot is looking for tight chains. Tight
Okay.
chains, because when the animal's pulling on it, the chains are tight.
It's tight. Okay.
I'm out looking for tight chains. They're like, "What the heck are you talking about?" Yeah. So
Okay. Yeah, that works. That fits the bill of the question. So, and then this one, what would be the first knot that you would recommend somebody learn who is getting into outdoor hobbies, be it camping, fishing?
wow,
If we want to keep it simple, we can go with the first fishing knot, or if you
dude,
want
what
to branch
a
out,
question! That's a great question, Jody. I'm gonna steal that one, by the way, just for
hey,
future.
go for it.
That is
Go
a
for it.
great question. Oh wow. The one I personally use the most is a 2.5 hitch.
Okay.
Because it cinches super tight and comes apart really easy. If you're
Okay.
tying down, is a 2.5 hitch. That and a bowline. A bowline's really good as well, but that's mostly for tying boats and stuff. And knot tying is something that I am intrigued by, but for some reason my brain cannot remember them very well.
No, okay.
I have to watch the video a lot and like, okay, oh, I did it. And then tomorrow I can't remember how I did it, right? But a 2.5 hitch square knot and fishing knots, I can do those, but yeah.
I
So
got you.
2.5 hitch is probably the most useful one.
Okay. All right. Now we're gonna move into the mystery ones. You picked these, so you're at fault if you don't like them. All right. So the first one is, what is your ideal camping setup? Camper tent or an open sky, be it in a hammock or just laid out around a fire?
RV.
RV.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I camped out of my pickup when I went to Wyoming last fall for 2 weeks, and that worked really well. I have
Okay.
I have a slumberjack tarp that comes out. I have a shell on my truck.
Mm-hmm.
A slumberjack tarp becomes it's so cool. It attaches to your luggage rack and goes out 13 feet and spreads out 10 feet. So you got this nice canopy that's underneath. So I crawl in there. I have the deck system in my truck too, the drawers,
Yeah.
I just crawl up on that and sleep, close my windows. I'm in there perfectly fine and get out. And then I have my little campsite. So I enjoyed that. I'm doing that this turkey season as well. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. All right. The next one is, what is the most recently used outdoors app for you? And this can include outdoors games, but
X.
what is it? On X?
I use it every day. On X, I
Okay.
use it every day. I use it every day. It is by far the biggest game changer for me when it comes to outdoor stuff. I can mark every trap when I scout cyberly scouting when I'm going out of state somewhere. I can zoom in. And on X is a total game changer. Yeah.
Okay.
I use it every day.
Okay. All right. And then this last question is, you are actually the first person that I have asked this. What is one outdoor activity that you have absolutely no interest in participating in?
Anything that requires exercise.
All right, fair enough.
Is skyjacking or bungee jumping or skyjacking, sky falling. So they call it diving, Jody, but you're falling.
Yeah, you're falling. Yes.
Falling.
Yeah.
Anything with sky falling, bungee jumping, anything like that, I got no use for whatsoever because I'm an old man and I don't bounce anymore. I shatter when I hit the ground. Okay. So anything, if that counts, then I would say that. But most outdoor activities, I'm pretty much, hey, let's give it a try. I don't mountain biking. Yeah, mountain biking doesn't interest me, man. I put this post on my social media the other day. Is this is a quote from Winston Churchill. I get my exercise by being the pallbearer of all my friends who like to run and do calisthenics.
Well, I'm
And
definitely with you.
yesterday was Ash Wednesday, so I gave up for Lent. All exercise except that what's necessary to sustain life.
Oh, okay. Well,
But
I'm
since you're
definitely
out
with you.
walking to the bathroom, I'm not in for it, man.
See, I'm with you on the bungee jumping and the sky falling. I do not want to be a grease spot on the ground
No,
somewhere.
no.
So,
I don't want them to pick me up with a sponge.
yep. But Pete, I appreciate it. I've enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. I know the listeners have also. If you aren't already following Pete and Christian Outdoors, do it. You don't have to thank me later, but you can if you want to. You'll enjoy it. Just trust me on this one. If you enjoy our content, you'll definitely like listening to Pete and his guest.
Thank you, Jody. I appreciate that very much. I really do.
Oh,
And
yeah.
thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, yeah. It's my pleasure.